join us when he is able to. Okay, Kel, I think we'll go ahead and proceed with the meeting. So before we proceed, I'll do just a quick roll call of members. We need 6 members to maintain quorum. I'll get the coordinator to do roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff.
Je suis présent.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor El Shantiri. Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor Menard.
Présent.
Councillor Kitts. Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Hughley.
Here.
Vice Chair Liepert.
Ici.
And Chair Tierney. You have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. So we'll go ahead and look at the agenda. First off, item number 1 is the public bike parking strategy. Exciting stuff. We do have a presentation and we also do have a delegation. So we'll hold that one. Item number 2, we got the status update, Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending March 19th, 2021. We have no delegations or correspondence. Is this item received?
Received.
Received.
Great. Thank you very much. Item number 3, it's a motion, a hydro wire bearing of Hawthorne Avenue. We do have a delegation, so this item will be held. Item number 4 it's a motion, Highway 17 to Ottawa Road 174. No presentations, no delegations. Would this item be carried?
Carried.
Great. So maybe Councillor Luloff, you have 30 seconds, just real quickly, since we've carried it, just to explain what this is.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity. Listen, the Highway 174 was downloaded from the province onto the municipality. We spend quite a bit of money maintaining it, and with people moving outside of the downtown core and Trim Road becoming the terminus, I think that it's incumbent upon us to ensure that that we are providing ample opportunity for people that are coming in from outside of the core to use the LRT. So what we're doing is we're asking the mayor to write to the province to make an investment in a parkade at the terminus of stage 2 LRT to encourage the modal shift coming into the city. This will reduce GHGs and wear and tear on our infrastructure by people who are not ratepayers in the city. It's good for the environment and it's good for the long term planning with stage 2 LRT.
Great, thank you for that succinct description. Item number 5, Navan Road widening, review of priority and the transportation master plan. There's no presentations, no delegation, nor correspondence, but I did just receive a message that there was a bit of a wording discrepancy within this motion. Kelly, did you just receive the updated version?
I did.
Is this something that you can put on screen just at a full fairness and transparency to our committee members?
Is it therefore be it resolved that changed?
So Chair, if I can explain, the only change that has happened was the word widening was changed to urbanization, because the real focus of this is to bring in the pedestrian and cycling facilities. It's not to widen for more traffic. That will happen eventually under the TMP. It's really to make sure that the TMP is looking at bringing in pedestrian cycling infrastructure when the timing is right for this particular section of road that is lacking in those areas. So it was more about the implications that the word widening has as opposed to the word urbanization and pedestrianization.
Okay. Now I do see 2 hands up here. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not. Did members of committee want this item held?
Mr. Chair, I think you should hold the item.
Great. I'll hold the item. And that concludes the agenda. So we'll go back to item number 1. Actually, Kelly, did we receive anything about all-way traffic control, Councillor King?
He is, that's going to be on the May meeting. He decided not to do it today.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure where that fell. Okay, great. So on to item number 1, we do have a presentation, and I'll turn the floor over to our wonderful city staff.
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Scott Caldwell. I know most of the committee members. Good morning. I'm with Parking Services, and joining me for the presentation today is Brandon Pollard, who's also with Parking Services, and we'll be delivering this jointly this morning. So just over a year ago, Roads and Parking Services started a process to address a gap in the coordination of our transportation network that had become increasingly apparent. And today we are happy to be bringing forward a strategy that will better focus the city towards engaging in proper consideration of parking for cyclists. Next slide, please, Kelly. So the need for a public bike parking strategy has been identified for some time now and was one of the follow-on actions from the Municipal Parking Management Strategy Update, which was approved by Council in October of 2019. When developing the strategy, the focus was on publicly available bike parking and on providing a framework around the what and the when and where for bike parking. This also addresses the fact that there's currently a clear approach and bike parking responsibilities are dispersed throughout different groups within the city. So the strategy sets out a clear mandate, accounts for bike parking in the context of the city's broader policies, and presents various tools and reference points that will become important as we move towards developing a public bike parking program. So the purpose of this report is to seek council approval of the strategy and also to follow up on a council direction from 2020 to report back on the results of an investigation into bike share options. So I'm going to provide an overview of the development of the strategy before handing it over to Brandon, who will review some of the details, and I'm going to conclude with a summary of the conclusions related to bike share. Next slide, please, Colin. So Stantec is a consulting firm that was brought on board to assist us in the development of the strategy, and we're joined this morning by Stephen Oliver from Stantec. They've done an excellent job in allowing us to develop a thorough, well-framed strategy, which was heavily influenced by an extensive consultation process. Next slide, please. So our consultation involved the public, cycling groups such as Bike Ottawa, councillors, businesses, and the parking stakeholder consultation group, which, among others, is comprised of community association representatives, a walking and cycling representative, and a member from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We were also heavily engaged with various internal groups who have a role to play in providing bike parking. Next slide, please. So there was a lot of feedback received through our various consultation points, and we captured this in an As We Heard It document, which was shared via the Projects Engage Ottawa page in January. This is a very high-level summary of the key issues and opportunities that we heard. Some of these connect to the lack of a coordinated approach around bike parking, and others help to clarify what growth of a bike parking program could entail, both in terms of options and approach. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the various components of the public bike parking strategy. I'm going to be handing it over to Brandon to walk through these in a little more detail, but the key point is that the strategy has been developed so as to allow staff to take a clear, focused and responsive lead on all things related to publicly available bike parking. So with that, I'll ask for the next slide and hand it over to Brandon.
Thank you, Scott. So this slide is an overview of the mandate component of the public bike parking strategy. The mandate is in alignment with the municipal parking management strategy and consists of a key principle and 3 objectives. So the strategy document contains the full wording of the 3 objectives, but we have them summarized in short form here. So the first speaks to providing an optimized supply of bike parking while also accounting for other needs of the public space and balancing them. The second objective is about accounting for the full spectrum of cyclists in terms of trip generators and from casual to commuter and everything in between. So lastly, we want to incorporate data-based justification for bike parking decisions. Next slide, please. So in terms of parking types and placement, the strategy summarizes a range of options with varying degrees of capacity, footprint, and costs. These options can be generalized into 2 broad categories, being secure and unsecure. The strategy also outlines placement considerations as well as recommendations for these options. Next slide, please. So the strategy also looks at both reactive and proactive approaches to implementing bike parking by using available data and context to identify the best solutions. Using the bike parking index tool, we can leverage available data inputs.
Hello?
We can leverage available data inputs and develop appropriate weighting, which factors into the decision-making process. For example, some types of inputs that would be considered here, for example, proximity to cycling facilities or transit stations, and employment density, as well as population density, are some of those inputs. We can also factor in existing bike parking to add an extra layer of context. We'll need to continue to develop things, but the demand map on the right is an example of one of the potential outputs of the index tool. A number of the recommendations coming out of this section are about refining and optimizing the tool and the process. Next slide, please. So this is a list of some of the supporting measures that come out of the strategy that have some action tied to them. So these came out of some great research into what other cities were doing, and the strategy outlines how they would best fit within the context of Ottawa. These touch on different ways to access better information and improve options and availability. For example, secure bike parking is one of the supporting measures that we're looking to implement. OC Transpo is launching their Bike Secure program at 4 transit stations this year. So we'll be monitoring that program closely as we look to implement secure bike parking in alignment with our implementation process. Curbside management in the short term will be focused on leveraging and expanding the existing bike corral program where that is determined to be the best option. Another example of these supporting measures is business collaboration, which involves exploring the feasibility of providing bike parking to businesses at a reduced cost. Sudbury has a bike racks for business program that does this. So adopting something along those lines could have the benefit of bolstering the available supply of public bike parking. Next slide, please. So these are some additional innovations and considerations identified in the strategy that will be a lens that we use when making decisions, like, for example, accessibility and equity. Some other things such as emerging bike designs and micromobility trends will be monitored and factored in as we move forward. There are a number of recommendations coming out of these supporting measures, which are identified within the strategy. For example, one recommendation that generated a lot of positive feedback was to explore options to increase bike parking at events. Next slide, please. So the strategy identifies the need for a public bike parking program, and the management approach component provides a framework that will be used to develop the program. Parking fee revenues have been identified as a funding source, and there have been resources identified to support the program. As an initial piece of developing the program, it will be important to clarify roles and responsibilities, and we'll be looking to create a single intake for requests. We look forward to developing the public bike parking program. So developing the strategy has been a great process, and we owe a great deal of thanks to our internal partners. Their input has been crucial to developing this, and we look forward to ongoing collaboration as we move forward with implementation. Next slide, please. And so the strategy contains a lot of great initiatives and actions that we'll be following up on as part of the public bike parking program. We have a detailed implementation plan included as part of the staff report, but here's broadly what the implementation will look like. We anticipate a phased approach starting in 2021, where we'll be starting some of the initiatives and addressing some of the immediate gaps. In subsequent years, we'll be able to put in place some additional measures. For example, we'll be piloting secure bike parking locations by 2022. And by 2023, we'll be looking at other initiatives like event bike parking and business collaboration. Budget requirements for 2022 and onwards will be identified as part of the budget process, and staff will advise council on the status of the implementation plan through the parking services annual report, which is typically presented to council in Q2 of each year. And so that wraps up the public bike parking strategy piece. So I'll hand things back to Scott to speak to the bike share review.
Thank you, Brennan. So when the e-scooter pilot was being discussed in June of 2020, staff were asked to look further into bike share options. So Within Ottawa, we have some history with bike share, most recently in 2018. But the efforts and staff investments to this point have not resulted in any type of sustainable or long-term option taking root. Stantec also supported this review, which was independent of the development of the public bike parking strategy. Different models were considered, as were the different types of bike share. There are a number of examples to look to in other municipalities, such as Toronto and Hamilton, Montreal, as well as American cities like Washington and Philadelphia. In determining if this is something that Ottawa should move forward on, there were various things that were taken into consideration, including costs and the status of the existing e-scooter pilot. Next slide, please. So the review of bike share models considered 4 options: a city-owned, city-managed model, a city-owned, contractor-managed model, a not-for-profit business or community entity, and a for-profit business entity. Depending on the purpose of the system, there were different preferred systems identified. For rapid deployment in the highest use areas, a for-profit model is most effective. However, in the cases of both prioritizing transit connectivity and ensuring a sustainable approach, a city-owned, contractor-managed model is consistent with the approach taken by other cities. Under this scenario, the city would take on the financial risk of purchasing, owning, and operating the program, while a private company is in charge of operating the technology and infrastructure on a day-to-day basis. So this allows the city to retain control over deployment so as to ensure a distribution of bikes that satisfies the intended purpose. Next slide, please. So while it is recognized that there are potential benefits to expanding micromobility options, the current conditions do not support moving forward at this time. From a cost perspective, the level of investment to initiate and support a city-owned and contractor-managed model would be significant. Part of the review by Stantec clarified that a minimum fleet size for Ottawa should be about 700 bikes. Looking at other cities, the size of a fleet could be larger than that, up to about 1,500 bikes. And this compares to our most recent deployment, which was more around 300 bikes. This would require an upfront investment on the part of the city. In addition, we know from looking at other cities that it is almost exclusively the case that revenues from bike share do not fully cover operating costs. This means that there would be an ongoing requirement for a portion of the cost to be subsidized by the municipality. Given the level of required investment, the current status of the e-scooter pilot, existing financial pressures as a result of the pandemic, and the expected allocation of funds in support of implementing this public bike parking strategy, it is not deemed to be a good time to proceed with this as an initiative. And go on slide, last slide, please, Kelly, slide 17. Thanks. So in wrapping things up, so this is presented as the last slide to capture what the bike parking strategy will mean for cyclists and residents. First, and hopefully most obviously, we expect there to be more available bike parking through additional facilities, higher capacity facilities, and through freeing up space by way of addressing things like abandoned bikes. This will involve broader options, including secure bike parking. With better internal alignment, we are expecting a greater degree of consistency and alignment with city principles and objectives related to things like cycling infrastructure and urban design. That better alignment will help to facilitate the process of contacting the city on bike parking related matters, a higher profile and single intake point for things like a new rack or reporting maintenance or abandoned bikes. And we also want to get to a point where we are actively pushing information out to residents to support them in their decision-making process and remove their barriers to cycling. So thank you again. Both myself and Alain Ganche are available to answer any questions when the time comes.
Great, thank you. I do see some hands up, but we do actually have a delegation. So if I can get committee members to lower their hands, unless you feel a burning need to ask a question of the delegation at this point. Our delegation is Dave Robertson today. Yes.
Chair, just a point of clarification.
Yes.
This meeting was sent to us 9:30, then was changed to 10, and now changed to 9:30. Can somebody explain why it was at 10 and now it's changed to 9:30?
Yeah, I'll look at the coordinator.
I'm not sure, Councillor. It's always been at 9:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's always been at 9:30, but it showed up at 10, and actually Councillor DeRose asked me earlier, and I told him it's at 10, and now it's back at 9:30. So just anyway, thank you.
Yeah, we'll look into it if there's a calendaring issue for sure. And we're glad to have you here, Dad. I appreciate it. So we'll go to our delegation, Dave Robertson.
Hi, good morning, Chair and committee members. Bike Ottawa is happy to be here today to support Ottawa's bike parking strategy. As part of the same report, however, we're concerned that staff did not recommend pursuing a bike share system for Ottawa. I'm going to use my time today to speak to the reasons why bike share is so important for our city. The staff report gave the following main two reasons to not recommend bike share. The system would not be revenue neutral, and bike share programs have been in decline in growth across North America. While they may no longer be revenue neutral, many of the costs can be offset with advertising, user fees, or efficiencies like using the Presto card. Washington, D.C.'s bike share offsets 77 to 84% of its costs in this manner. Hangzhou, China actually has a free bike share system that turns a profit purely off of advertising. And it's also a big job creator for the city. In addition, bike share systems in Canadian cities are growing where they're viewed not as profit-driven models, but as public service models. Bike share has proven to be an important part of moving people in major Canadian cities. Let's look at some advantages of a bike share system in Ottawa. If 77% of all Ottawans are going to be within 5 kilometers of our LRT stations, getting there by active transportation will be critical. A 15 to 20 minute bike ride for those 5 kilometers away from a station is a big difference compared to a 1 hour walk. Multimodal transportation is about having options: walking, bus, train, scooter, bike. Compared to bus and train schedules, bikes are available anytime. Adding e-bikes to a system, which is the current trend for bike share, further removes the barriers of distance and physical limitations. Bike share removes barriers of bike ownership, including theft, vandalism, maintenance, lack of parking, and bike storage. Bike share also reduces road congestion, air pollution, noise pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and makes for healthier residents. Remember, every trip on a bike is one less car on the road, and this is very much in line with the city's draft official plan to move modal share to one of mostly sustainable transportation. Last year, CAA reported that Vancouver and Montreal had 2 of the best bike share systems in the world, and that's a pretty good reputation to have. So let's look at some of the bike share systems in Canada. In Vancouver, they have 1,700 bikes, over 190 stations. Annual memberships are $129. Recently, April 4th and 5th, both those days recorded just under 1,700 trips, and that's the equivalent to every bike in their fleet out for a ride that day. In Montreal, this is the largest system in North America with close to 9,000 bikes, 660 stations, a $99 annual membership. They had 5.3 million rides in 2018, and they're expanding their fleet to include 725 e-bikes this year. In Toronto, they have 6,850 bikes, including 300 e-bikes, 625 stations, annual memberships, also $99. They operate year-round with studded tires in the winter. 2 million trips in 2019, which was up 23% from 2018. Up another 35% in 2020 to 2.9 million trips. Toronto's system had an $11 million expansion in 2020, where 80% of the money came from Ontario's municipal commuter cycling program. This comes after a 2019 expansion of 1,250 bikes and 105 new stations. And their system has grown 680% between 2015 and 2020. On April 4th, they recorded 10,222 rides. That's the equivalent to every bike in their fleet out for 1.5 trips. With these numbers demonstrating how successful publicly funded bike share is in Canada, how can Ottawa afford not to have a bike share system to make our city more livable? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. We do have a question from Vice Chair Leeper.
Okay, go ahead.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry, I was mouthing duck for those on YouTube. Good morning, Dave. Thanks for being here. And obviously you're preaching to the converted in my case. I do want to play devil's advocate for a couple of minutes and throw 3 statements at you and hear how Bike Ottawa reacts. I guess the first thing that people ask is, we've tried bike share in Ottawa. It didn't work. Why would the city step in? How does Bike Ottawa react to that?
Okay. You know, I think I'll reflect back to Janet Siddiq Khan when she launched City Bike in New York City, and what they did down there and what she said when they started up their system was go big or go home. You know, you're not going to get people building habits and behaviors if they can't make convenient connections. As part of a public transportation system, you know, there's got to be those stations around in close proximity to make it convenient. Once you do that, then you get the ridership.
It's, I agree with you that there has to be scale in order to work, if I understand, or I think we have slightly different numbers, but my understanding is City Bike is up to 12,000 bikes in New York City. Toronto's got 7,000, Montreal's got 7,000. And this means that people are able to find a bike near them in a convenient fashion. And that's so critical. Second devil's advocate statement, not everyone can ride a bike.
But a lot of people can, and a lot of people can learn, and it's about providing options.
You mentioned e-assist bikes, for instance. How does that help increase ridership?
I think it's a trend that I've noticed personally. You know, when I'm out cycling, the past number of years, I've really seen a shift in the different age groups that I'll see. And one thing that I sort of notice is that a lot of maybe older people that are cycling are using e-bikes. And it just adds that little extra help to get where you're going. You know, hills become less of an issue. You can just you know, fly up those hills without any extra effort. You don't have to worry about getting tired, maybe if you're at the full extent of whatever trip you're taking that day, and then suddenly you turn around and you have a headwind. You know what? With an e-bike, it just doesn't matter. So it removes those barriers.
I call e-assist bikes the kind of the Valium of cycling, because it just kind of takes the edge off.
Exactly.
They're a joy to ride. There's any number of accessible bikes as well. For example, tricycles that could be part of a bike program. You don't necessarily need to be able to ride a 2-wheel bike in order to take advantage of a well thought out, thoughtful program. My final devil's advocate statement to you, Dave, is we have scooters. Why would we go into bike share?
Again, it's another piece of the puzzle. I don't know if everyone's going to be comfortable using scooters, you know, but bikes have been around for a long time. And I think a lot of us can say we rode bikes as kids, even if we haven't ridden as adults. There's no reason why we can't get back on board. It doesn't mean that people can't use scooters, people can't use bikes. I think it's all part of the solution. And the other thing is distance, you know, is scooters. I think we were looking, the study that the city did with the scooters was, you know, trips were maybe around 1.9 kilometers. You know, with bikes, it's just a lot more comfortable to go a lot further than that, especially with e-bikes.
I think a lot of us are assuming that the price point would be different as well with respect to scooters versus bikes. Our scooters are obviously a private service that is being offered on our streets for prices that are not necessarily affordable to a lot of folks. You mentioned the $130 price point or thereabouts for Vancouver. I think that's fairly standard across the jurisdictions that have these. How important is price?
You know, I think these are very reasonable in price. You know, you break that down and that's like $10 a month. You know, our publicly funded transportation system here in Ottawa, you know, prices are going up all the time. And this starts knocking down a lot of barriers where people can get where they need to go when they need to go. I know personally, I work a shift work schedule. And, you know, while I did love taking the Line 2 train to my work, it didn't work for me every day because, you know, some days I start early in the morning or I work on Sundays. And so bikes are very necessary for me to get to and from work.
Fantastic. Dave, thank you very much. Chair, thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. We have another question, Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for being here, Dave. Just another maybe devil's advocate point as well around winter use and scooters versus bikes in the winter, for example. Are the programs that you've been looking at for bike share also used in the winter, and is there take up in the winter for those bike shares, for example, in Toronto and other areas?
Vancouver is year round. Of course, they don't have the a similar climate as we do. Toronto is maybe a little bit more mild, but they do go year round. As I mentioned, they do actually have studded tires on their bikes too, which is, in my opinion, is a huge advantage with any icy conditions. It just removes that barrier completely. You know, and then you can say, look at Boston's system, you know, same thing too. They're running year round. I was speaking with them at the Winter Cycling Congress this past year, and they said they've had great success, you know, year round, even through the winter.
Okay, great to hear that. Thanks very much, Dave.
Great. Looking, I don't see any other committee members. I do see Councillor Meehan has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very interesting arguments for bike share. Just wondering, how would you incorporate this, the green outside the green belt into this, and are you? I mean, we've got large suburban areas where people can bike around their communities. Does that figure in your plan anyway? And can you explain how it will work?
I think that the suburbs for cycling is low-hanging fruit. I think it's very common to think of, you know, the suburbs have been built around the automobile, but one thing that the suburbs have that the downtown doesn't have is space. And so it's much easier to build cycling infrastructure. And in my opinion, it's, you know, it's going to be that much easier to get people to those LRT stations. If you've got the good cycling infrastructure, we should for sure have those stations in those areas to get those people to public transport so that they don't have to rely on their vehicles.
So you're looking at it primarily as a mode of transportation to transit. You're not thinking that the cyclists would come from the suburbs to and cycle downtown. There wouldn't be a great number of people who'd be willing to do that, but get to transit. That's the primary source.
Yeah, right. I think it's more multimodal transit. One thing with bike shares is there's typically a time limit for each ride. So 30 minutes is pretty common where you have to get from station to station if you're dealing with a system that actually has stations. There's other models that are dockless. So 30 minutes, it's getting to that next station, and then you can very easily switch out bikes and continue your ride. So making those longer trips, probably not something for bike share, but for multimodal transport, huge.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Great. Thank you. I'm looking at the board. I think we're cutting you free, Dave, but thanks for coming out and speaking to us today.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. At this point, I am going to go questions to staff, but just prior to that, Councillor Menard, and forgive me, I just got it right now. Kelly, if you can put up, I guess it's a additional motion that he has on the screen. And I'll ask Councillor Menard to read that out if you could, please.
It's a direction to staff, Chair. I can do it during my time, or I can, sure, if you want me to do it now. And it's that staff continue to look at options to fund bike share in Ottawa as a critical transportation link to Ottawa's new LRT, and ensure continuity on the work done to date while allowing time for the bike parking strategy to be implemented, and provide additional insight on the status of the parking reserve and funding commitments.
Great, and I think a lot of that's taking place, so that sounds pretty good. I'm going to look at the board. I'm going by the order of hands that have popped up here. So, of course, we go to members of committee first. So, if I'm seeing this correctly, Councillor Menard, you're up.
I think Councillor Gower was up first, but I can. Oh, is Councillor Gower not on the committee? But
everyone wants to be on this committee, but unfortunately he's not. So
I don't mind him going first. Okay, whatever you'd like, Chair. So I'll go first if you'd like. Or
thanks, Sean.
Okay. So I just wanted to say to staff a big thank you and congratulations. It's great to see all the work done on the bike parking strategy. They've really done a good job here, and in my briefings with them, I've answered my questions about it. We're seeing more and more people use bikes as a kind of primary or regular transportation mode, as well as for recreation. It's the fastest growing mode of transportation in Ottawa. So as that grows, proper bike infrastructure, including parking, is going to be important. So thanks to staff, having that one window where you can kind of request it through Scott's office and others, that'll be really helpful, and looking forward to it unfolding. On the bike share program, I also wanted to say thanks for staff for looking into the potential for bike share in Ottawa. It's really nice to see in the report that they see a city-owned option as ranking best, because we can kind of dictate where that goes, how it connects to our transportation system. Whereas in the past, you wouldn't necessarily see these, for example, in all areas of the city. You wouldn't see them in the suburbs. They kind of focused on the core, but with our own program, that's able to go everywhere. And so going with something owned by the city really allows us to direct it, and I appreciate that as well. I think the issue we're coming into now is, well, how do we get this started in Ottawa? How do we proceed with this? Given what we're spending on LRT to get that started, how do we make sure people can get to it in all areas of the city? So I have a few questions, Chair, for staff. So first one is can staff confirm that a city bike share could benefit and be deployed in both urban and suburban communities in Ottawa?
Chair, the work that's been done to this point is only part of any potential future solution, and identifying the details around what bike share might be. Looking at other models, there certainly is precedent to suggest that it could be both. But this is a big part of what we would need to, what we don't know right now. We've gone so far as to investigate our options and models, but we have not contemplated deployment sizes, anything of that nature.
Okay, and I think we had talked about a fleet size initially of sort of 700, which could cover some areas of the city. And I just want to confirm, if staff can confirm, that we've if we found the money to do this, which seems to be the biggest obstacle at this point. It sounds like staff would like to do this. It sounds like they'd like to have it in the city, but that funding is the biggest issue. If we did find the funding for the capital investment up front, would there be a value add, particularly for connection to the city LRT, where 77% of residents will be within 5 kilometers of the line? Does staff see a value in connecting to LRT through a program of this sort?
Well, Chair, certainly that's one of the benefits of a bike share. But again, the extent to which that benefit could be realized, those are all things that we would need to explore further. We know from other cities that that is how bike share can be used, and how that can apply to Ottawa, given our geography, and translate would need to be further investigated.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the purpose of that direction, is to keep that direction going and investigation going. So I appreciate that. On the funding piece, which I understand is the real issue, it's mostly the initial $4 million startup cost that I understand is the bigger issue, and that for other bike shares that have been reviewed, the costs usually end up being recovered up to 80–85%. On average. So our yearly operational costs could be fairly minimal for a program of this sort. Is that accurate, that the upfront cost would be for that first 700 about 4 million, and then through cost recovery we'd only be looking at an operational cost of about 500,000 if our assumptions came to pass?
Chair, based on the research that we've done to this point, that is the indication. Correct.
Okay, that's fantastic. And so, I mean, given our greatest impediment seems to be finding the initial 4 million in capital costs to start the program, I just want to go through some potential funding options so we're all clear on what we have and what we could fund it with eventually. So we have the parking reserve fund. And is that something that could potentially fund a program like this? And how much is in that parking reserve fund right now?
So Chair, so we do have a clarification that there would be an alignment with bike share with respect to our municipal parking management strategy and the funding model. So providing the bike share type is a docked, which would imply bike parking as part of the bike share solution. It would be an appropriate expenditure from the parking reserve fund.
Okay.
As to the balance of the parking reserve fund, latest information we have is that the year end for 2020 is just over $20 million.
Okay. And we need about 4 to get started on the capital.
Chair, if I could maybe just clarify something. The councillor has said that the funding is the biggest issue or impediment to a bike share program. However, we also have a resource issue. Our focus really is on the bike parking strategy at this time. We would have to redirect resources into a bike share program and look at what would fall off the plate. So I think really the focus at this time would be on the bike parking strategy. And, certainly as time goes on, if we'll get together with our colleagues in Transportation Committee and see what something like this would look at. But I would like to make sure that, resources are an issue, and it's also a case of priorities when it comes to funding.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Councilman Hard?
Thanks very much, Chair. And and I'm just trying to go through some of the different sources of funding that could help with that operational requirement, and mostly the capital funds up front. Totally get. We want to roll out that parking strategy, bike parking strategy, over the next couple of years, which is great. Would a program like for capital costs for bike share qualify for federal dollars that have been earmarked for last mile connectivity? Last mile transit connectivity, would that be something that would qualify under the capital programming funding?
We might have to redirect that question to, I don't know if Evie has that information. I don't think we would have that.
Chair, the federal announced active transportation program hasn't defined the parameters as yet. But typically they are looking for infrastructure additions to the network rather than something like a bike share program. But we don't have the parameters as yet for that program.
Okay, and recently FCM and others have been advocating for a doubling of the gas tax fund. And the federal government recently did announce that would occur, which I believe is another 50 or 56 million or so for Ottawa. Does the gas tax fund contain categories that would qualify for the capital cost expenditure for a bike share program?
Chair, again, I'm unsure. We would have to look into that and get back unless Ms. Chi has the answer on that. We'd have to look into that and get back to the councillor on that.
Okay, that's fine. You can get back to me on it. I think the Gastic Fund has expanded its categories, but I'm just not sure if the capital fund for a bike share is included. Yeah, it'd be great to get that information.
Thank you, Councilman Menard. If you have more questions, Chair, I'll have to put you at the bottom of the board again. Sorry about that.
I'm good. Thanks so much, Chair. That's great.
Excellent. So I'll go to Vice Chair Leeper.
Sorry about that. Good morning, and also to staff, thank you very much for the bike parking strategy. I'm really encouraged to hear about a one-stop shop approach to bike parking. It can be really frustrating from the councillor's office perspective sometimes to try to figure out who's going to put which parking in or maintain it, and having the single intake is going to be extremely helpful moving forward. And I think you've heard as well the priorities that people in Ottawa have for their bike parking, and I think that's going to be useful guidance as the program rolls out. No surprise, I did want to ask a couple of questions about the bike share. I guess the first question I had was, Councillor Menard provided the direction back in June to take a look at bike sharing and the options. Staff have actually come out and made a recommendation in this report not to proceed with it. I'm wondering why staff took that additional step of not just describing what the implications of bike sharing would be, but that we should actually not proceed with it.
Chair, so again, the direction that we've been working from was to investigate options, and when we walked through that process, and as a lot of good work went into developing, the cursory understanding of the models and what was viable and not. Once we stepped back and accounted for where we were with the bike parking strategy and the desire to move forward and all the really solid things that have come out of the bike parking strategy and need to be implemented, which accounts for resources and funding. And the state that we're currently in, vis-a-vis the pandemic and the e-scooters and how the e-scooter pilot has been extended, all those factors kind of combined to tell us that now is not the right time to move forward until we had a little more clarity around the e-scooters, and once we were able to implement pieces of this bike parking strategy first.
It's tough for me to talk to some of the stakeholders out there in the community who are advocates of bike sharing, because it sounds to them like the city is opposed to bike sharing, and I think that is the result of a recommendation that staff were not asked to make, and that really is council's decision as to whether or not it wants to proceed with a program like that. Can I just get some clarity? I mean, it's really in council's hands based on some of the information that you've given us to determine whether or not we want to move forward with a bike sharing, and it's up to councillors to make motions at budget and to have that discussion at budget time. What are the additional pieces of information that you would need to determine the financial sustainability of a bike sharing program in Ottawa?
Chair, we have, at least like I said, from a cursory perspective, the research that has been done gives us a good starting point and we've talked about the financial impacts from both an investment perspective and an ongoing operating perspective. And I think that gives us a good perspective to work off of and to clarify that however we can to figure out exactly what the cost would be. Again, the other thing too is that the $4 million that has been mentioned as investment, that's the gaming for that baseline, that smaller scale scenario. So there's the deployment, the distribution would all kind of factor into that to determine what that price tag would actually be.
One of the things I did not see in the report was what the expected operational deficit might be per year, because we know that there would be offsetting revenues, presumably from sponsorship, but a large amount of revenue coming in operationally from user fees as well. So is that something you feel you have a good handle on what that deficit might be?
Well, Chair, we know from our research that I think we pulled a couple of examples, and the cost recovery in other cities sits around, I think it was 77 to 84%. So it gives us an idea of when we look at operating costs in the neighborhood of about $3 million in that 700 bike scenario. It gives us an idea that our net costs would be in the neighborhood of $500,000 or $600,000.
Okay.
Based on those assumptions and the work that's been done.
Yeah, like a 700 bike program. If I can just ask a couple of baseline assumption questions here to keep us moving forward on this discussion. Do city staff agree that having a bike share program would increase cycling modal share over the course of the next decade?
Chair, for that answer, I'm going to ask Vivi to provide some context.
And Chair, before it gets to Vivi, I just wanted to go on record to say that staff are not against the bike share program. So I hope that, and certainly the councillor is right, it is up to council to make those decisions with all the information in front of them. And as I said previously, I think, to satisfy the direction, we took a cursory look. We would need to take a more substantial look at a bike share program before council would be informed to make that type of a decision.
Thanks, Kevin.
So, Chair, I'd like to remind everyone that our transportation master plan and our cycling plan have policies in place already that support a bike share program. It does not speak to ownership. So the TMP and our master plans are about the what, not how it's implemented. So with that, the policy, we agree that anything that is done to promote cycling is beneficial, and that's why we have those policies that council approved.
And secondly, would a bike share program in Ottawa, depending how it's designed, does it have the potential to increase transit ridership in staff's view?
This is would be for people who don't own a bike, so that they have access to another mode of transportation. At our transit stations, we already have bike parking, and with this bike parking strategy, that will be augmented, or the plan will roll out to ensure that there's multimodal mobility at our transit stations.
Not quite what I asked. I'm wondering if having a bike share program in Ottawa has the potential to increase transit ridership.
If those who don't have a bike use the bike share program, and they then ride to a transit station for their longer trips, wherever they need to go.
Okay.
So that's an option that would be available to them.
Okay. I will leave it there. I believe that these are the sort of discussions that council needs to have information about, and I'm really pleased to have that information in this report. But that really the recommendation or impetus to explore actually implementing a bike share should come from council. Chair, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. On to Councillor Fleury, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone, and I too want to thank Scott. I know he's been on a number of walkabouts with me in Rideau Street, Byron Market, and some of the spots. So I certainly happy to see the fundamentals come to play. I do have a number of questions on the bike parking strategy, just so I'm clear. In the report, we talked about 11,000 bike parking spaces that are available, and there's a number of them that they'd be NCC, or that they'd be a specific park or velocity bike rack. So could we get clarity on what that number is, just for from a data point of view? Just what does that 11,000 entail?
Absolutely. So Chair, That 11,000 is a roll up of the sidewalk, ring and post bike parking, the velocity bike parking, as well as any bike parking we have at parks and our city facilities, and in our bike corrals on street. So it's all those, all that bike parking that we offer on within the public right of way.
There's a mention in the report about the intention of collaboration with businesses. It can mean a lot of things, and you and I in the past have talked about secured areas. So could you maybe speak to what does the report mean when it says trying to find ways to collaborate with businesses?
Well, Chair, the primary intent of that supporting measure is to really increase our footprint, right? We are going to be able to invest in bike parking on city land, sidewalks, parks, city facilities. But by including that, that potential for collaboration, it means we can also work with businesses to introduce and provide bike parking in a broader area. So in front of a store, and a grocery store, or a storefront on a main street, and it could be expanded as well. I mean, the same type of approach could be applied when dealing with schools or the NCC, or there's lots of different possibilities there. But it's more so intended to reflect providing more of the unsecured multi-ring or ring and post type bike parking.
Okay. How would, as part of the strategy, if a particular landlord, say the Rideau Center, has an empty storefront on Rideau and wants to work with the city to convert that into a secured bike parking, with whatever that would mean, how would they go about that?
Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities to explore unsecured bike parking. I think that's a big deficit for us right now in providing that option for cyclists in Ottawa. We certainly have some ideas, with respect to getting involved in secure bike parking, leveraging some of our existing facilities, whether they be parking garages or parks, that type of thing. And we're looking forward to getting into that. I mean, to your example, Councillor, that is something that I think would fall within that net, right? And it's something that we could explore. I mean, obviously, funding and priority comes into play, but I would look at that less so as a collaboration opportunity and more so as an opportunity to expand our secure bike parking network.
Okay, but you feel that you would have the authority with this report to negotiate with a landlord or a business to advance whatever form works, or would you need further direction?
I think absolutely, Chair. I think absolutely to explore it, and then as we needed, as we fell short of any delegated authority, that's something that we would bring to council for their direction or approval.
Okay. One of the things, or the anomalies in the report, and it's unfortunate we have to talk about it, but bike theft is something that we hear about often. I know we're talking about bike parking, which is the space to leave a bike safely, but I feel it misses one component, which is when you leave your bike and you lock it up, you also want to make sure that when you come back, it's there. So can you maybe give some insights? I know Ottawa Police had some, I think it was Garage 509 or something like that initiative last year, but how does that tie into this effort?
Certainly, Chair. One of the key points, and we looked at, this strategy considers a placement of bike parking and what types of bike parking, and one of the things that came up, through our consultations, and it's reflected in the strategy, is this need to account for security, right? So there's three key things we want to account for: security, convenience, and the impacts of winter maintenance to maintain that inventory. And security is paramount, and there are a number of options, whether they be ensuring bike parking is put in well-traveled areas, well-lit areas. These are things that may have been accounted for in varying degrees up to this point, but become a focus for us going forward in terms of making those decisions, those strategic decisions in terms of where we install bike parking.
Final question. I want to go back on some of the questions from Councillor Menard and Leeper about the bike sharing. So we had a bike share. We had a number of bike sharing. We had the NCC partnership over the years with the Bixie that didn't work. Then we had the right bike, the purple bikes that were around in the neighborhood. What happened to those? Because ultimately, those were a physical asset. I think it was led by Causeway. We must have supported that effort financially.
Chair, I don't have the particulars as it pertains to right bike and where that landed. I'm not sure if Evie might have a little more context to that. If not, it's something that we can take away and clarify.
Chair, the city did not fund Right Bike. It was an independent, not-for-profit organization. We don't know what they've done with their equipment after they stopped the service. And you talked about the NCC Bixie. That was funded by the NCC. So the city did not participate after the pilot project, which was very small, just 50 bikes or so. And afterwards, the NCC went on its own with Bixie for a larger program, but still, contained within the downtown. And the city did not participate in that.
Okay. To Councillor Leeper's point, just to understand, so the report implications as it relates to bike sharing leaves it as a tool to continue to consider, but not at this point. Is that fair to say? Because I'm unclear. There was a motion brought that was a direction, and then the report states something that we're not pursuing it. But where does that leave us legislatively? Are we, if there was opportunities, Councillor Manal talked about other funding pockets or so on, if that was to come to be, would we have to bring a motion again to reinstate council's will, or is that sort of understood until a business case is brought forward?
Chair, I think we'll take the direction and proceed and continue to consult with council, and as if a decision arises that we require council approval, then we will bring that forward.
So, Chair, I guess I would ask that a decision on bike sharing sort of not be concluded today. That we have a staff report that is the bike parking strategy, that we advance that. I think it's a solid report, as I think all members have said, but I wouldn't be comfortable in advancing a firm position on that, because I think we have to leave ourselves open to opportunities that might happen. Could you clarify that be a direction or clarification in the final report?
Sorry, Councillor, when we get to a few more, we have a few more people to speak here. But on that, we do have a report in front of us. I think it's very clear that, and it's been raised a few times, it's not just a matter of just the dollars, unfortunately, but I think we've also heard from Vivi, and I see Alain is unmuted there too. If opportunities do come back, everything does have to come back to council. So I'm not really clear on what you're looking for, because I think Councillor Menard's motion continues the effort in the background. But again, it is always a full decision of council. It would have to come back to us, and they would have to have that type of report. And I'm looking at Alain. Would that be a fair assessment?
That's correct, Chair. And I wanted to reaffirm the point that Kevin made, was that the report should not imply that we're against bike share. We're not against bike share. It's just an overall context of basically what the council direction has been to date related to advancing the cycling infrastructure and the bike parking strategy. That's what we're delivering to council, and that's kind of the current focus. But we're certainly not discounting bike share as being a future opportunity. So the fact that we've provided a recommendation shouldn't change the fact that, it shouldn't imply that basically that staff are against it, because that's not the case.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. And you know, I understand the point that is being made around bike share with pandemic and pandemic costs and trying to prioritize all of the things that we need to look at. I don't necessarily really agree with the point about e-scooters being, well, we're in that lane now, so we're going to go down that, because I actually see e-scooters as a little bit more of a novelty and a little bit more downtown centered opportunity than a bike share that I think could roll out across the city. So I don't think they're the same, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I don't think because we're looking at e-scooters this year that it necessarily prohibits us from looking at bike share. So I guess a couple of questions on bike share. And one is, could we or have we considered an opportunity for some sort of naming rights on a program? Because I actually think if you have hundreds or thousands of bikes spread out around the city and they could be branded, that there's a value in that. And we might be able to raise part or all of the capital costs of that program through a naming rights opportunity. So is that something that has been considered?
Sure, we're certainly aware, and the report makes a couple of references, or one or two references to other cities where sponsorship is part of the equation. And we would not be close to that. And it's not something that was, I guess, explored in great detail as part of this initial review.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we should look at that. Like, I think we should, in the background, if not the forefront, at least be exploring what opportunities are available. And I think we should look at some sort of naming rights. I mean, I guess I thought of sponsorship a little differently, but I think of a branding opportunity might raise some capital dollars that would be needed. The other thing that I would like you to continue to look at in terms of a bike share program is the opportunity to, like Hamilton did, remove barriers for people in communities for cycling. I think of the ward that I represent, Hetherington area, where we're always trying to get free bikes for kids. And I think if we had a robust bike sharing program, we could probably use, you know, passes, like give them to the Boys and Girls Club for opportunities for kids to use the bike shares. So I think as part of the work in the background that's being done, I would appreciate if you would look at opportunities to remove barriers, especially in low-income neighborhoods. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gower, you're up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, appreciating that the bike share is only a part of this whole report. I did have a couple comments on that, but I did have a question about the report in general. So I actually don't agree with the conclusion of staff that bike share in North America has stalled. In Toronto and Montreal, they've both had record years recently, and they have been expanding, and they've added new stations and increased riderships and even added e-bikes. Like I think in terms of overall mobility goals and how it integrates with transit specifically, we talk a lot about the last mile and the final kilometer in Canadian terms of how to get people from transit stations to their homes, especially in a suburban context is where I'm thinking. And I think sometimes we look at really complicated ways to do that, driverless vehicles or a new shuttle system, when we actually could have some very simple tools and technologies like a bike share that could accomplish the same thing. I think the capital expense we've heard could come from the parking reserve. The operating at $3 million initially could be recovered through user fees and sponsorships, which would leave a very small cost. I do really appreciate what staff is telling us, though. They do not have the resources right now. It's not necessarily the top priority right now, but I think it's worth looking at the next term of council when we're setting priorities, this could be the way to look at it as an option. Then there's a lot that staff have on their plate, and I respect that, but I would like to consider this for the next term of council as a priority. There's also the question, when we do have limited dollars, are we better to spend it towards more safe cycling infrastructure rather than a bike share project, or maybe it's both, but we still need to explore it. My question though for Scott, I guess, is a lot of this report is really, I see it really focused on the urban core and less on the suburbs. The state of private and public bike parking in the suburbs is pretty dismal right now. In fact, my team, we've done an inventory of local parks, and we're planning to use some cash in lieu to add bike parking to each of our local parks in Stittsville. I was wondering if Scott or anyone else on the staff could provide a little bit of how do you see this bike parking strategy expanding outside of the core, more into suburban areas as well in future years?
Absolutely, Chair. The bike parking strategy is intended to apply citywide. There's no intended. Obviously, we have to, the inputs we're going to be using to make our decisions are going to be based on, where's the largest demand or potential demand. But it doesn't preclude us necessarily from focusing entirely on the downtown core. We, in going through the municipal park management strategy refresh in 2019, we did get clarification that the parking reserve fund money or the parking fee revenues could be spent on any bike parking, not just bike parking where we have existing paid parking, vehicle paid parking. So that really does open things up for us. And I know there's a map in the presentation which kind of focuses on downtown, but that's not intended to be representative of where our focus will be. We'll be looking citywide and applying the data around and our index tool to all areas of the city, and looking forward to working with all councillors and local stakeholders.
Well, that's good to hear. In terms of the feedback process for this, did you have a lot of feedback and response from suburban communities? Did you track ward by ward in that way?
Chair, we did. We saw the majority of the feedback through our survey, at the very least, was from urban wards, urban areas. We did receive some feedback from more suburban areas, but so there was some representation, but it was predominantly from the central area.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everyone for the ongoing discussion, and staff, of course, for this report. I also met with Scott and his team several times around the bike parking strategy, and I see it as a really clear and solid way of moving forward to ensure that we have the parking that we need, and the secure parking that we will need moving forward for bikes and for people who cycle. There's nothing worse than getting to your destination on a bike and not having any place to park. It's frustrating if you're in a vehicle, but I can tell you if you're on a bike, it's that next level up. So I do thank you for that. Of course, I am disappointed that the bike share is not something that we're contemplating right now. I think that we should. I think that as a city, we do need our transit ridership to increase, our transit revenue to increase, and this bike share does give you that last mile. It takes you to transit. It takes you home from transit. And scooters, just, I need to reiterate that they just are not a replacement for cycling. Doesn't mean no cyclists don't take a scooter, an electric scooter. I think our own Councillor Leeper is proof of that. But overall, the electric scooter program, as Councillor Dean has pointed out, it's more aligned with Uber. Really, it's a bit more. It's more expensive. It's probably the same price point as Uber, and it may even remove people from transit at some parts of the year, but it certainly does not replace cycling. Cycling is just a different way of moving around the city. And good conversation today around what is required in suburban communities, because I think that is really important. It really is that we have to concentrate on how do we get people in all of our communities, not just downtown, but in all of our communities, and not just get into the downtown, but around our own neighborhoods. So it just, those things are separate. And on the bike share, I know that you mentioned, VeloGo, Right Bike. I was around when they were put in place, and you're right, they weren't successful, but they largely were not successful because they could not establish on city right-of-way. We, as a city, made the decision, and I remember being very opposed to it, that we would charge for our right-of-way for these nonprofit groups. Right Bike was a nonprofit group. So by charging for the right-of-way, it meant that these bike share programs weren't established in places where somebody who, at the time, they were concentrated in the downtown, but somebody like, say, myself, I live and work downtown, and I could never take them because they weren't available to me where I needed them. And that, I think we have to be clear that was as a result of the city not providing access, low-cost access to our right-of-way. So I just want two questions coming out of that is, did you consider, I know that, you were looking at a city-owned bike share, and I think that is the best model for us. But if another Right Bike or another, small nonprofit were to establish itself or want to establish itself in the city, would staff today recommend allowing free of charge or at a very nominal cost our right-of-way? And do you believe that would make a difference in terms of the feasibility?
To chair that, a little bit of echo, sorry. That was not part of our scope, or the review that we undertook to kind of consider fee scenarios or who would be charged. We looked at it at a higher level than that, and that is something that would require its own analysis and probably a report back.
I wonder if maybe Vivi Chi could, given her position, would staff agree that a bike share program could be more feasible if, in fact, we were providing our right-of-way, our city right-of-way?
Chair, I'll let Vivi comment on that, but just before that, staff are wide open to looking at all those things. However, the caution I would give you is you have some modes that are asking exactly that of you right now. One of them is a car provider, I won't name names, that would love to have free access to your dedicated transit way so they can run and make a lot of private sector money running their private vehicles up and down our transit way, as an example, or dedicated bus lanes. So the framework I would throw to you is your right of way, you own it, is a commodity, and you would need a very good comprehensive review of that and the principles as to who would get quote unquote free and who wouldn't get free. And so the short answer is, Councillor McKinney, absolutely, you could do that and increase bike share as an example. There's a long list of people that would want your right of way and access to it, whether it's a sidewalk, whether it's a lane, and so forth. So yes, short answer is yes. If you were focusing just on bike sharing, that would certainly lower the capital costs, the operating costs, and so forth on that.
Sure, and I understand that. I've actually met with some of those groups, and surely as a council, we would be able to decide, and we would make good decisions around who would get our right of way. Today, we give up our right of way, or we we provide it for patios. Like we understand, I think as a city, I hope, what the value of our right of way, and we, before we would give up our transit way to for-profit, vehicles.
Councillor, just
Very
being
different.
cognizant of time,
Yeah.
you're down to 15 seconds. So sorry,
Okay.
if you can get to your question.
I will. I'm going to ask one last question. Just again to Scott. When are we going to be looking at what point in our master plans are we looking at origin destination, so that we do have a really clear picture of how people need to get around the city in terms in the suburban communities, our rural communities, and downtown, so that we do have a clear understanding of how we need to move forward as a city in our mobility.
Chair, I will take that question because it's about the origin destination survey, and it's linked to our work that we're doing on the transportation master plan update. As you know, we were supposed to start it last fall, but because with the pandemic, we were not going to get a normal condition, whatever normal is, and so we're assessing that and how we will gather data for this update if the travel patterns don't stabilize anytime soon. But we will report back. As you know, I send an update memo if there's a change in our TMP update schedule. So we will inform council of that. But you're right, the OD survey, it's a household survey, and that's the one that helps us understand how people are moving about, what modes they're taking, and then it helps us see the trends from past surveys.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And I'll just add this, Chair. I don't think I need to go back on because I think I am at the bottom. I just want to add that I think that it is really important for us to have that understanding. I know we're in a pandemic, things have changed, but I don't want to see us waiting 2, 3, 4 years to understand how we move around the city. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think your points have been captured. So on this item, I just want to say there's no more speakers on the board. I want to thank staff. This has been a long time coming. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, our Stantec people. You put a lot of work into this, normalizing our bike parking. As Councillor McKenney mentioned, there's nothing worse than when you don't have a spot to lock up. Let's face it, some of these bicycles are getting quite expensive these days. So you put a tremendous amount of work on this one. So on the Menard motion, is that item carried?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, that the Menard is it's not a motion, it's just a direction.
Forgive me, direction.
No votes.
Great. And on the actual base motion itself, is that item carried and the report? Received?
Carried.
On to, now I did forget, and Kelly's trying to keep me in line here, apologies. As I was running through the agenda, I was supposed to say confirmation of minutes from March 3rd. Is that item received?
Received.
Okay, thank you. So I'll jump on to item number 3, I believe, Kelly, we're on, the motion about hydro wire bearing on Hawthorne Avenue. We don't have any speakers on this item. Oh, we do actually, forgive me. We actually have, one delegation. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yes, there's one delegation.
Great. And just before that, we also have an additional motion and Councillor Suds can speak to it, but I'll get to, if you can put it on the screen, Councillor Derouz is introducing it for Councillor Suds.
You want me to read it, or you want Jenna to speak about it first?
Yeah, let's go ahead and maybe Jenna can speak to it. That's a good point.
Terrific. Happy to. So working with George and the team here today, I had some concerns with respect to this motion, and namely it is about ensuring that the current policy is applied equitably across our city. And those concerns stem from the fact that my community back in 2010 under our previous councillor, Marion Wilkinson, was subject to a 10-year levy in a similar circumstance where there was, I believe it was 10 hydro poles proposed along a new stretch of Canada Avenue where development was occurring. And the desire was for those to be buried. There was a cost estimate of about $2.5 million to do so, and policy did not support that burial. So previous Councillor Wilkinson did move forward with a special area levy, which took place over 10 years. So it just stopped last year in 2020 in my community here, in which residents on average paid $18.07 a year on their property tax bill. So my concern is that the policy as it stands today, and as I understand through reading the report, does not support the burial, does not meet the conditions of hydro burial for Hawthorne. And, you know, in my mind, the purpose of a special area levy is that the residents, the taxpayers, I should say, in that area have to pay for a service that is not available citywide. And that's what my community did to bury our poles. So all that to say, that's where my concerns stem from. Again, in reading the policy, I know there is a desire to review the policy. I believe it is next year. But as it stands, we have a policy in place, and I think that we should be following it. And I think that we need to be mindful of applying it equitably across the city.
Great, thank you for that. And Councillor Drews, if you just want to go ahead and read that motion, and then we'll get right to delegations. And after that, we'll come back for questions to staff and debate.
No problem, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that this item to be referred to Council for consideration, and be it further resolved that staff and finance services to work with Councillor Menard between now and the April 14 Council meeting to assess the feasibility of a special area levy and capital work to fund the burial of hydro wires on Hawthorne Avenue. Estimated cost between 1.1 million and 1.7 million.
Great, thank you. So Kelly, at this point, I believe we have Tom as one of the delegations in the waiting room.
Yes.
Great. Let him in.
Good morning, Kelly. Can you put the presentation up, please?
Yeah, working on it.
That's great. Good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. I represent the Old Ottawa East Community Association. We are fully in support of our councillor's motion. You all should know as well that this issue has been the subject of the previously approved official plan and the Old Ottawa East secondary plan, and as well the draft of the renewed official plan now being considered by the mayor and council. What we are seeking to do today in our approach is to inform the committee of past concerns raised by the Main Street Road Safety Audit, by Bike Ottawa, by our own community association, and finally in the Public Advisory Committee sessions sponsored by the city's own Senior Project Manager for the major reconstruction of Greenfield, Main, and Hawthorne. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kelly? This gives you a quick overview of what the Greenfield, Main, Hawthorne project is like. The streets in black will be completely torn up for both water and sewer, as well as repaving and new active transport routes. Each of the existing OPs with the Ottawa East secondary plan call for undergrounding of overhead wires on Hawthorne. So the question is, do we respect the official plan and these fundamental plans or not? So can we go to the next slide, please? These are direct quotes taken from the official plan and from the new draft OP. Councillors, what we are seeking are equity and safety. We wrote to the mayor in January about outcomes from the last Public Advisory Committee meeting left a range of safety and security concerns not dealt with. This motion from Councillor Menard has a large number of positive features, but we want to stress at the outset that safety is our community association's #1 concern. Removing utility poles from Hawthorne and North Main serve a number of aims, but none more important than improving pedestrian and cyclist safety. This goes a long way to make active transport in Old Ottawa East a more attainable goal. Can we see the next slide, please? So this is the context. Elgin Street, as you can see, was vastly improved with the removal of poles and the burial of its overhead wires. Hawthorne has a relatively narrower right-of-way, and making space available for safe sidewalks and cycling lanes is really becoming a challenge for the project management team. Hawthorne is the main link between Elgin and Main Street and should be revitalized like Elgin, that is without poles. And this is not the same old Hawthorne now with thousands of new residents at Greystones and Corners at Main, where we're trying to encourage them to take up active transport. Next slide, please. So there'll be 2 slides about the advantage. One is certainly resilience to climate change, to reduce the damage to poles and transformers above ground through various severe weather events. This is a standing policy now in Nova Scotia as well as in Sweden. It promotes regeneration and desirability of our neighborhoods. For example, we are now zoned along Hawthorne and can't take advantage of that because upper story setbacks from hydro wires aren't allowed. It improves the streetscapes, and of course, because we're a national capital, it makes our central routes look more like those in other capitals, including Paris and New York, as you can see, and London. Second slide, please, Kelly. Removal of the power poles and support wires will also significantly improve snow removal capabilities and reduce wintertime pedestrian safety issues along Hawthorne and North Main. As you saw in the previous slide, the poles are between the road and the sidewalk and make it almost impossible to completely remove snow along that side of Hawthorne. 2 other points that are important. In the next decade, MTO will demolish and rebuild downtown Queensway bridges, including Main Street Overpass and the Rideau Canal Bridge. Undergrounding of utilities along Hawthorne and North Main would greatly facilitate MTO planning and bridge reconstruction operations. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kelly? So the incremental cost, we know we've heard some estimates. The original hydro estimate for Elgin was $8 million. After the review, and we actually see what came through, the cost was closer to $3 million, which included property connections, and Hydro Ottawa paid half of that. Hawthorne is only 20% of the length of Elgin undergrounding, so the cost we think would be much less than the amount that's now being proposed. And in fact, if there is an advantage to Hydro, if they've paid half on Elgin, why wouldn't they pay for half on Hawthorne? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The entire roadway is being reconstructed, as are the intersections at both ends of Hawthorne. This is exactly what the existing official plan called for, and the upcoming renewal of the official plan calls for these kinds of conditions for undergrounding utilities. There could never be a better time nor better conditions to bury hydro lines along Hawthorne and North Main, as these are going to be completely dug up for other buried utilities. We encourage you to support Councillor Menard's motion. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. We do have questions. Councillor Luloff.
Mr. Scott, do you believe that that the city should have a blanket policy for this kind of work across the city, and that what's good for Hawthorne is good for other main streets across the city?
I guess I wouldn't have raised those points as being unique if it weren't in the official plans already, both the current one and the new one coming up. And it's very specific in the approved secondary plan for Old Ottawa East. So that's the basis. It's in policy already. We're not asking for new policy. We're asking you to utilize the policy that already exists.
Thank you very much.
Great. I do see we have Councillor Deans, as she's on committee, can go first, and then Councillor Sides after that.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the motion that Councillor Menard or Councillor DeRoos has introduced in terms of looking at a special area levy for funding the burial of those wires. I mean, I don't know how broad they're suggesting in terms of the area levy, because I'm very familiar with Hawthorne. There's not a lot of homes there, so I'm not sure how far the area levy would be. You said you're representing the Ottawa East Community Association. I don't know if it would be the entire ward. I'm sure that wouldn't go over well with those residents, but can you imagine a scenario where there might be an area levy in some part of that constituency to assist with the cost of burying the wires?
It's not. The answer is yes, you could, but the other part of that is how broadly do you base the benefits of taking these poles out? Because we see people coming from the Alta Vista area, from Ottawa South, using the new Main Street cycling corridors, walking to Ottawa U, coming across and connecting to the NCC pathway going down the canal, and Hawthorne is a main connector. If you can make Hawthorne safer for cyclists and pedestrians, how far does that reach extend to other communities than Old Ottawa East?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Suds.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Tom, for joining us. And I think you've raised some really great points, many of which I agree with, frankly, particularly around safety. I did want to just clarify, and you've referenced, the new official plan and some policy work that's currently underway, which are leaning towards support and referencing support for burial of hydro lines. I think the challenge, and I just want to clarify, or maybe have staff clarify, the current hydro burial policy as it stands now does not, it's my understanding, does not support this hydro burial. If maybe staff can clarify, I'm understanding this correctly?
Councillor, yes, it's Court Curry here. You are correct. The current policy would only permit the burial where there was a third-party funding source to undertake this work. Ms. Duclos is here. She can speak to the rest of the project, where hydro burial is being undertaken for technical reasons. And so the policy therefore is not applicable to those poles.
Okay, thank you. And it's a bit of a struggle for me. Again, just because, when there's a policy in place, it's there for a reason and it applies across the city. So when my residents have had to pay for this, I do struggle with that and the fact that the policy doesn't support it.
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
So no further questions for a delegation. I see. Thank you very much, Tom, for your
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that last point that Councillor Suds raised?
Actually, unfortunately, Tom, I don't think there was a question there, so I'll ask you a question so you can provide your response. What do you feel of the comments that Councillor Suds provided?
When we first started the project, the Greenfield Main Hawthorne project, there was no burial of hydro wires considered. That was considered to be outside the scope of the original project. As the work went along to try to design active transport on Greenfield and North Main, the project manager got agreement from Hydro to remove the poles and bury the wires because of the limitations it was placing on planning and design. In particular, because the underground dig was going to have to require Hydro to remove the poles anyway and then replace them. So if the poles were coming down, it made no sense to put them back up. The same is going to be true of Hawthorne. Hawthorne is going to be completely dug up. It has a high pressure water main on its north side. All of its sewers are going to be divided into domestic and storm, and it's going to get new water supply. The poles will come down anyway. Why wouldn't you do the same thing on Hawthorne that you're doing on Greenfield and North Main? It's really, really impeding the design and planning for active transport along Hawthorne. That's the main reason that we're asking for these poles to come down, is to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists.
Thank you for that, Tom. Seeing no further questions, we'll cut you loose there, Tom, and at this point we'll go questions to staff. Great. I don't see any hands. Oh, Councilman Menard.
Thanks, Councillor Tierney. Are we on referral motion right now, or which motion are we voting on first here?
That is correct, because of course, if this motion proceeds, we'll have to deal with this at council, and the original motion would be behind us. So yes, we're speaking to the motion in front of us right now.
Which is the referral motion?
To council,
okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, well, look, thanks for this. And I think Tom addressed some of the other points that are critical about this, but there's a few critical points that were not mentioned that I do want to raise. It is the city who is moving towards a policy of burying hydro wires on traditional main streets as they are reconstructed as part of the new official plan. This project is starting before the approval of official plan, and will finish after the approval of the official plan. And so if there was a difference of a few months, this would be here more as of right than we are today. And it's also doing so because there's intensification, financial and quality of life benefits to see this occur when a street is being redeveloped. It makes it very different than the situation that Councillor Sudds has described. I think back in 2010, when Councillor Wilkinson did this, the reasons were very much different and more aesthetic in nature. Since then, the research has evolved. Canada Avenue, of course, is mostly, Councillor Sudds could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe single family homes. And so we've seen the evolution since 2010. On Elgin Street, on Montreal Road. And of course, as you can see, this has been our policy as part of the old official plan and the secondary plan, and indeed part of the new official plan. But the biggest factor here is the traditional Main Street increase in new tax revenue for the city. So this project itself will pay for itself in this area. My understanding is in a little over 10 years. And then it'll be contributing back to more tax coffers because of the height allowed and required setbacks of hydro being buried versus not buried. In Councillor Sudds' case, and I guess it was more Councillor Wilkinson back in 2010, right, 11 years ago, that was not the case. It's very different in that way. So unlike this street or streets like Saint Joseph, which could see increases as part of a traditional main street and potential burials in the future, this is something that would add to the city coffers, not take away from it, which is a different situation. And so the project is going to be finished by the time the new OP is approved, and would, as I say, qualify for burial under that draft. I will just ask staff a couple of questions, just clarifying points. I think Court Curry's points are well taken, and he's and himself and Mr. Migueles and Ms. Duclos also have other pieces of information that I think are be very valuable for this committee to hear. So if I could just ask what staff's thoughts are on burying hydro wires in this particular situation, if you can give us more information about this particular situation. So I guess to Mr. Migueles or Mr. Migueles would be great to start, and Ms. Duclos as well.
Councillor, I don't think Alain is with us this afternoon, but I can cover that off. We work in the same department. So certainly as you've set up, yes, council put this policy in place in 2011 as a response to a number of Main Street renewal projects that were being undertaken where there's a community desire for the burial of hydro wires. Wellington West is out in my mind as really the firing gun that caused the council today to look at the issue. At the time, the policy did note that there were substantial intensification, urban design, and operational bonuses of burying hydro wires. However, ultimately, the council of that day decided that the cost was too prohibitive. And so, as I said earlier, burial would only be undertaken whether there was technical reasons or where there was third-party funding. Certainly, as you and the delegations have, and a few members of council pointed out, the draft OP is very aspirational in that it speaks to prioritizing the burial of hydro wires in design priority areas. We will be reviewing the policy that's a roadblock in this instance after the official plan, because we'll have our new design priority areas, whether they're rural, suburban, or urban, defined. Be able to advise council then where we believe that a new policy is best applicable. But certainly I would agree that the burial here would not only improve the aesthetics of Hawthorne, but would improve the intensification goals that we have for Hawthorne as of today as a traditional main street. But I would defer to Karina to speak further to the actual technical aspects of the specific project. Happy to answer any further questions with respect to the existing policy or our planned analysis that we're undertaking next year.
Thank you, Court. Through the chair. This project, we're here today because the policy for burying hydro does not cover us to do it without our direction from council to do so. We do agree that while the policy does not cover, it provides a lot of other opportunities. I'm not going to repeat what Court just said. It is important to note that this project has some sections that we are going to be bury hydro, and the only section in question here is the Hawthorne piece with 7 poles. The reason why we need to separate the discussion is when we go and we dig the other sections, specifically the Main and Greenfield that we are burying, when we need to put back the road, those poles would be in the way of accessibility, sidewalks, cycle tracks, etc. On the Hawthorne section, we are able to build the road back to meet minimum accessibility and mobility issues. And that's why we say that technically the policy does not cover that section.
That's very helpful, and I think the big point around we are very there is one pole there. I know on Hawthorne buried as a matter of current technical policy. I think the big piece here is that the major financial benefit is allowing more developable space to exist and avoid the setbacks that are mandated for safety purposes when above ground hydro wires are present. So it means that there's more room for housing to meet the goals of our official plan and revenue that comes in. City planners often speak of a basket or a cross around the poles, and it's a clearance or a bubble that needs to be maintained around the poles around hydro wires, usually 5 meters setback. And so the basket forces developments to be further back than the lot line as they get to that second or third story setback, and it goes all the way up. And so it's a big piece for allowing more development in this area, which is set for quite a lot of intensification. And as I say, it would pay itself back, unlike other examples we've seen 10 or 11 years ago. Thanks very much, Chair. So I would just say, ideally, this has been on the agenda for a month now. Ideally, we wouldn't refer this in this way. Ideally, we would not refer it and pass the motion as it's worded, which also has a clause in there that says we need to work on the financing part of it. So I hope that committee can work on that today. Thanks very much, Chair.
Great, thanks, Sean. We have Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karina, just to follow up to some of those questions. So the Hawthorne design, how advanced is it?
The Hawthorne Chair, the Hawthorne design is very much, I would say, we passed preliminary design, so we're in the middle of between preliminary design and detailed design. The project is going to be tender in phases, so we are going to do a very small piece first, and we are looking at 2022 for construction, so we have time to switch gears if we have to.
Okay. If the segment that we're speaking about here on Hawthorne didn't see a removal of the hydro poles, what would be the implication on the design and specifically sidewalk width or cycling track impacts?
So like I mentioned earlier, Councillor, we can build the project as is designed with the poles. We are going to be dealing with minimum clearances and minimum distances, but it does fit.
Can you be a little more specific on like what would be the sidewalk with or without the poles?
Oh, you're talking about the cross section? I don't recall that information. We have different cross sections in the project. Councillor, I have to get back to you. I apologize.
So I heard the argument of development, which is an opportunity for us to consider. I'm not hearing the argument of clarity on infrastructure. So I'm hearing, oh, we can work with the poles, but I'm not hearing what the implication of removing of the poles would be. Can you maybe speak to the specifics of that? Because I've certainly seen what happens when we don't remove poles, and now, you know, Bryden and Public Works and other team members struggle with it. So in operationalizing winter maintenance and even accessibility. So can you maybe speak to what are the implications of keeping the poles in that location?
Are you referring to development or you're referring to infrastructure?
Infrastructure, accessibility, okay. Complete streets goals.
So we will definitely have a more open space, easier to move around like Elgin Street without having the poles in the way. Now, the accessibility standards give us a width of sidewalks that are minimum, and that's when we are saying we are able to maintain the minimum widths that we need for that location.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have to be careful here. We have a local councillor that's working with his community on an initiative of redoing the infrastructure, and obviously we have, to Councillor Sudd's point, we have to review our hydro pole policy. It's something that we've had to do. You know, I've had to live through Montreal Road, Councillor McKinney's had to live through Elgin. It was painful to bring those to committee because every time we go back to what's the standard. So, you know, I would say it's dangerous both ways. It's dangerous to move without a firm policy review. It's dangerous to put in a levy because it has implications for local residents, and the benefits are greater than that. And frankly, they create inequity. If inequity was created at the time of Canada, great, let's bring that up as a discussion point. But I don't think doubling down on inequity is the best approach. So look, I won't be supporting that, what I think is like a reaction to emotion. I think the local councillor's report does bring a review. It doesn't fund the project. It says, look, I'm looking to bury the hydro wires pending funding. I hope that, you know, that puts kind of the pressure on all of us to bring forward a substantial policy on what we want to see relating to burial of hydro wires, which would give the, you know, up or down on if this is the approach. I'm in favor of burial of wires generally. I think we miss opportunities. We've seen that on Main Street. We've seen that on Bank Street. It's an issue. So I'm certainly not in favor of pushing a levy today. I think, you know, I would advise colleagues to just support Councillor Minal's initial motion and let the review be undertaken. Maybe give a clear direction, and maybe that's my question to staff is, you know, Court, when would we be able to come back with a full review of under which context would hydro burial be advanced and favored on an infrastructure project?
Through the chair, Councillor, the intention would be to bring forward a new policy Q4 2022, so next fall and towards the end of the year, post official plan approval.
And just a follow up to that. So Karina, your team, this project would begin when, or when does design decision have to be made for that, for Hawthorne?
Well, the project is scheduled. There's a section that we are going to build this year, but the majority of the project and this impacted area is planned for 2022. subject to budget. So we need to go to council and ask for funding approval for the construction of the project for the 2022 budget. So we are looking at 2022 construction season. Depending on how that schedule lines up with the revised policy, we may or may not have time to revise the design for the underground of this section. So we may need to either reassess or postpone if we need to underground Hartham and the policy is not revised by then.
Okay. Well, I'll be voting against the referral motion because I think it does give us the current Councillor Manal's motion does give us the window to just say, hey, look, let the local council work through those, and if there's a need for committee to re-engage on it, we'll be there. But I'm happy to see that we're actually reviewing it substantially because that will continue to happen. Everyone wants to see burial of wires, so we have to put fair context around that. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Councillor Dudas.
My question is to staff regarding the referral and just what that would accomplish. I do understand from the existing motion put forward by Councillor Menard that it does speak to finding funding sources. So trying to understand what would be achieved by spending a couple of extra days determining that. Would there be a conversation about a special levy or other alternatives within the motion that as it stands?
Chair, I'll take that. And perhaps, oh, I see the Chief Financial Officer has waded in.
Perfect. And just for clarification on this referral motion, it's just about, we're not making a decision either way, essentially. It's to get the data and present it at council where the referral will take place and the decision will be made at the council table. So just for clarity, we're not saying levy, we're saying collect the information. Is that correct, Jen? Yes, you're nodding yes. Great. Sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
I think you've answered the question, Councillor Chair. That's great. It gives us the opportunity to take this away and just look at an alternative and see what it looks like and share that with Councillor Menard before we go back to council.
Okay, so my question is though, that why hasn't, I mean, this item's been on the agenda since last committee. Has that not been happening already? Like, this is just a little bit of a surprise. And I know we had a meeting this morning. It was very helpful with staff where staff spoke about, you know, the history, kind of the patchwork of whether there's a DC for burying hydro lines and the plans for the OP. None of it referred to what was happening in Councillor Sudd's wards. None of it was to that motion. So I'm really just trying to understand what's the benefit of referring this and what we would get out of it that would be different from what we're looking at today. Because I don't mind having more data and I don't mind having more information, but I just need to know that we're going to have something that's beneficial, but can continue to see investment in necessary infrastructure upgrades. Yeah,
and just to add to that, I see Wendy's just ready to speak. I think that's kind of the crux of the problem. We have a policy issue here. And, you know, again, as a councillor in an area that has had the residents pay for stuff, obviously, I feel the councillors working in the best interest of her constituents. We need all that information at the table. And I don't also want to forget, Councillor Menard is looking at chipping in as well through CIL and other things. So there's quite a bit of effort on this. And Wendy, I don't know if you want to add to that or not.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. And Councillor Dudas, to your point, I think it just really gives us that opportunity to take it away and look at all of those options and opportunities that we have before us to be able to find the funding to deal with this. So as the motion stands in Councillor Menard's report/motion, that funding is not identified. It will have to be identified through the 2022 budget process. So if we look at that levy piece, that's something that we can achieve in a short time frame and achieve it, I'm going to say, outside of that budget process as well, very similarly as to how we've worked with Councillor Sudds on a couple of items in her ward as well. So it really takes us and it gives us that time to work with a councillor to find other ways to fund.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't ready because I was pretty certain Matt Leeper was going ahead of me, but here I am. I'm not giving up my spot now. Listen, you know what? I can understand that with the lack of a clear policy, this conversation is kind of wide open, and I can understand where Councillor Suds, you know, has to bring her concerns forward. Her residents just finished paying a levy on Canada Ave. I'm very familiar with burying hydro wires on a traditional main street. I'm also very familiar with Canada Avenue, as a matter of fact, having worked for the previous councillor way back when it was first developed. But you know, all streets are not made the same, and that is why we're going to see a change with our official plan around traditional main streets. And I have to say that on Elgin, had we not removed the hydro wires, and it's actually the poles, let's call it what it is, had we not removed the poles on Elgin, we would not have the streetscape that we have now, that allows for business to flourish, that allows for people to move about safely and comfortably. The poles also require either guy wires or exceptionally large bases, and exceptionally, because we looked at all of this through Elgin Street. It wasn't, you know, we couldn't say, well, let's put up the pole without guy wires. It was either going to be wires coming down that took up more space, or it was going to be a very, very wide base. And Elgin Street, really, we were told $8 to $11 million, and that magically came down to $3 million when you know, we understood the full ramifications of what that meant. And Hawthorne carries pedestrians. Hawthorne, like Elgin, they're not just local streets. They carry commuters, cyclists, pedestrians from different parts of the city, and we have to take that into consideration. And we are through the so far the recommendations through the official plan. And quite frankly, on Elgin Street, I think, you know, I have to remind people that that decision was made last minute. We fought and fought and fought for it. We were told no, it was going to cost $8 to $11 million, and at the very last minute, we decided, you know what, this is the best for Elgin, and as a council we supported that, and as a result we do have the sidewalks that we need to carry the people that commute on Elgin Street. So I would suggest that, you know, it's just to say that I don't have a vote today. I would not support the referral. I think that Councillor Menard's motion report today is clear that he'll be looking for funding opportunities. It will come back to us, but I think that we do really have to be cognizant. I've had other streets in the downtown that have been redone since Elgin, and I've not come and asked for hydro wires to be buried, and neither have the residents. But on traditional main streets, it was outside of the lack of really safe cycling infrastructure, it was the most controversial piece that we dealt with on Elgin Street. So going forward, it will be a policy. You know, let's not throw this out because of a few months. Let's not look back on this in 10, 15 years and say that, you know, there was a council that decided not to bury hydro wires on a traditional main street because we were a few months off in our planning. Take a look at Elgin Street, take a look at Rideau. These are shared streets. These are not, you know, local streets. These are shared streets, and we want to be proud of them. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Meehan.
Oh, thank you. I got surprised too. Thank you, Chair. I'm not on the committee, and I'm just coming into this this issue as an interested observer at this point. But it speaks to me to a larger issue, which always sort of manifests itself, especially out here. And like, and I know that some of the other councillors will relate to this when people say, like, why did they do that? Why didn't they do the whole thing? That doesn't really make sense. What makes sense to me here in listening to the arguments is that part of Hawthorne is going to have buried underground wires, and we've got 7 poles that we're looking at. It doesn't make much sense not to continue to bury those poles in my mind. But here's the question. If we've got the official plan coming up, and it is part of the official plan that we will be looking at burying our hybrid wires, is it not possible at this point to put into the official plan that when it makes sense, when we are digging up a main street, when we are doing renovations to something, when it makes sense that the entire project be done at the same time, that we do it at that time? Is there any way, and I guess I'm addressing this question, I guess, to staff, is there any wiggle room now with the official plan to put that in there, that maybe, or we could get this particular project to fall under that? Like, why would we not? It's not logical to not continue to bury these wires. And as Catherine said, as Councillor McKinney said, it could probably be a lot less expensive, but to continue to have the wires there and be looking at them down the road and wondering when at some point will these get buried doesn't make any sense. And the public will say it time and again. Why does the city, it comes down to money, of course, but we hear it from our residents. Why did they do that? That makes absolutely no sense. So let's do the right thing and do the sensible thing here and find the funds to bury these wires now. That's it for me. But I'm just putting it out there. If we can possibly change the official plan in some respect, that when it makes absolutely sense to bury wires, that we do it at that time, so we don't have to go back and do it again later at an additional cost, because we've seen that happen and it makes everybody a bit crazy. So I think this project makes total sense the way that the councillor is advocating for it. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Hubley, and then I see Councillor Suds batting cleanup on the referral motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I just want to get some clarification here. I didn't think the deferral was talking about not burying the wires. I thought what Councillor Suds was looking for in this motion was for her residents to be treated the same way as we are proposing to treat residents in other parts of the city. And so my question is, I want to clarify a couple of pieces. Is Canada Avenue classified as a traditional main street?
Chair, no. Yes and no. The section that was that ultimately was buried by special levy is not a traditional main street, but the town center portion that you're familiar with is a design prairie area.
Okay, because when I go down Canada Avenue, I see businesses, I see some of the tallest buildings in Canada, and I see some residential in there as well, which is what I thought we were striving to do across the city, was to have a mixed community like that on a street. I'm not familiar with this piece of Hawthorne. Is that residential or is that business?
Chair, it's both. It's primarily functioning right now as a residential street. However, the zoning is permissive, and both the current and the future official plan are aspirational in terms of the redevelopment of the street with mixed-use development.
Okay, so what I get here is two similar streets then. That's what I'm hearing. So I think this really comes down to an issue of fairness. Are we going to treat the residents of Canada north and other parts of the suburbs, such as my own community in Stittsville and Barrhaven and Orleans, differently than we treat people in other parts of the city. I think it begs that we defer this, as the motion suggests, to council and allow staff to take a look at this and see how we can go forward with a clear policy on this so that all residents are treated the same. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Alan. Vice Chair Leeper popped back on the board there, so I'll go to him first. And you're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry about that. I got big wide monitors. Sorry, so I am frustrated this morning that this is a discussion. The contexts for Canada Avenue and for Hawthorne are completely different. And we're talking about a decision that was made 10 years ago. There have been leaps and bounds made in thinking about how to design our cities since then. We just heard during the bike parking discussion from our GM of Transportation Services, right-of-way is a commodity. It's something that we can leverage. It's something that we need more of. And in the very heavily built up areas of urban Ottawa, we need to grasp every chance that we get to give ourselves more of that commodity. And we've also heard about the payback, the funding source for this, which is to remove that hydro wire constraint on development in order to allow for an increase in tax revenues. I think these discussions drive residents a little bit nuts. We are in the midst of an extraordinarily contentious official plan discussion. And the residents who are in neighborhoods that are targeted for very, very significant intensification are talking to the city about the lack of commitment from the city to create a public realm that supports the kind of intensification that we're looking for. I don't know why we would even consider referring this back to look at a potential levy. Councillor Menard is already working on finding the funding sources to do something that I think every resident of Ottawa would agree intuitively needs to be done. Let's let him continue that work and create a better public realm and an intensifying neighborhood that I think every resident will understand we need to do, regardless of some slavish devotion to policies that are no longer something that we should be adhering to. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting because I thought I heard a different answer to the question Councillor Hubley asked than Councillor Hubley heard. So I just wanted to clarify with Court. The question was, in the case of Councillor Sudds, was that section where there was a levy a traditional main street? And although you said part of Canada Ave was a traditional main street, the section where there was a levy was not. Is that correct?
You're correct, Councillor.
Okay, so it's not the same at all. And in my mind, traditional main streets need to have the wires buried. And that's where we're heading. And in this case, we're just a little bit ahead of the new official plan, but it would be, in my estimation, a real lost opportunity if we didn't bury those 7 wires when we're digging up the street. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to delay it and wait for the official plan and then tear it up again. I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense at all. So when it's being done, it's a traditional main street. If you look at Elgin, how it turned out, you look at other traditional main streets, they're being used by tourists, they're being used by people from across the city, and they're really a destination, and those poles need to be buried. I hope that hydro, like they did on Elgin Street, will assist in the cost of burying them. I mean, it's astronomical cost to bury those wires, but one has to think it's a lot cheaper once the road's already ripped up. So it seems like the absolute right time to do it. So I feel like we should just accept the Menard motion and move forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your points. And just before we go to Councillor Suds, I have a quick question to staff, actually. I remember Elgin Street, I actually voted against it because I thought, why are we not burying the hydro wires? But yet, I think everybody else except for Councillor Blais at the time and I were voted against it for various reasons. There was no approved money to bury those hydro wires. I think the tune was going to be about 11 million or something. It was quite a good ticket, but it was found at the end of the day. And was able to make it happen, which was a great improvement. But I think this, you know, I've heard these discussions, we did this for Elgin, we did this for Elgin. Well, we didn't do it for Elgin. We actually voted knowing the hydro wires were going to remain above ground. And it was just luck that they got buried. I do think this has been a very healthy discussion. At the end of the day, I think we're going to find a good path. And in regards to the motion, this is just about getting more information and bringing it to the council table. But again, I don't like the unsightly wires either, and I think we've taken quite a bit of time talking about this. So at this point, I'll go to Councillor Suds. Oh, Councillor Menard has his hand up.
Well, I appreciate that, Chair. I just wanted to, can I share my screen just so you can see the street that the area we're talking about? I don't know if that would help councillors, but I think it might.
Councillor, I think we're fully aware and we've had a good description. And unfortunately, they can't share the screen because that's how Zoom bombing starts, and we're not going to do that today.
Okay. I don't know if someone else can, but I mean, I'm looking at the Hawthorne traditional Main Street. We're talking about a fairly short block where part of the hydro wires are going to be buried and part of them are not, very close to many businesses. I think Mr. Curry was right when he said residential and businesses, but there are many businesses along here who would also benefit. And this area is slated for significant intensification. It is different than some of the other areas that are not on traditional main streets. And it's the same with Saint Joseph, which again, should be slated for significant intensification, should see burial. And so I think we're at a point where we've had a very good discussion about this. I have the motion in front that would allow for staff to talk to me about various funding options, and I'm open to those funding options. But I think, you know, referring this back and saying that, you know, we're you know, going to push towards a special area levy, that's just one of many options here, including other CIL, including other discussions with finance that we've been able to have. I think you know, given the support of PIDE, Planning Infrastructure Economic Development, on this, on the motion that I tabled, which I worked with them for, I think it was months, Court, that we were working on it, but we worked on it for a long time, and it's been tabled for a whole month. So I understand we want to treat residents absolutely equally. I get that, but we also have made decisions 11 years ago where policy has been evolving and changing. And we wouldn't want to lose something here because we're a few months too early, for example. So I just hope we can be reasonable about this one and work on it together. So appreciate that and your indulgence, Chair. Thank you.
Great. We have Councillor Kavanagh. You'll get up there soon, Councillor Suds.
Thank you. I thought Councillor Suds was going to go first. Thank you. No, I support what's being discussed. It's something that we should do across the city. This, you know, it always takes one place to be a good example, and we're going to be needing more and more of this with our new official plan. So I hope to see more of it. I know in Bay Ward we'll have more traditional Main Street that we didn't have before. It doesn't exist to the extent that it should, and those are in the plans. So I know this would be very welcome, and I just, you know, immediately I envision wider sidewalks, you know, poles not in the way. This is the right thing to do. We got to work towards it, and there's always first steps. I can understand that something that happened 10 years ago, it was not quite the same, and it sounds like it was in a different type of area. So we have to move forward, and I hope we do. This is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Great. Okay, you're up, Councillor Sides.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you. I do think this is a really healthy conversation, and I appreciate that we're having it. I won't get in, there's a few points of clarification with respect to this section of Canada Avenue, but I won't get into it. I think what's important here is to clarify that what this motion is doing is asking that we refer this to council. So that gives Councillor Menard and staff another week to look at this, and simply asking that they look at a special area levy as an option for funding and share that data with us. As I said, we have a policy in place right now, albeit it is an old policy, but it is a policy that does not support this currently. I am all for burial of hydro wires, don't get me wrong. I think that this is a healthy reflection on where we're at, but I want to make sure that we're making an informed decision. And I think that in fairness to past decisions, that including an assessment of what a special area levy would look like to fund this is an important point to make. And so that's all I'm asking for today is let's set this aside for a week. Let's back at council. Let's give staff the time to look at what that would look like so that when we have this more fulsome discussion, we have that information in front of us. That's all. Thank you.
Great. And you're quite correct. This was a very healthy discussion and will help guide future policy repair for sure. So on this one, Kelly, I'm going to call for the votes. If you can go ahead and please start calling out the committee member names.
Okay, so on referral, Councillor Luloff.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
No.
Councillor El Shantiri.
No. Eli?
Councillor Deans.
No.
Sorry, having a problem today with the internet.
Okay. Councillor Deans.
No.
Councillor Fleury. Councillor Menard.
No.
Councillor Kitts.
No.
Councillor DeRuse.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Vice Chair Leeper.
No.
And Chair Tierney.
Yes.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
Great. So obviously that referral motion has failed. I encourage members of council to support the motion that is there. So on that item, is that item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Great discussion. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, and forgive me, my screen's flipped off here. I believe it is, are we down to, oh, item number 5, Councillor Dudas's motion about Navin Road. Councillor Gower. Oh, you're on mute.
So I am. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure I understand the motion correctly. And could transportation staff or even clerk's office procedurally, I just want to make sure that this isn't jumping one road up in the queue in terms of prioritization. Yeah, so that's my question. Is this queue jumping in any way and moving this particular road ahead of other roads already identified in the TMP?
Chair, I will take the question. No, it does not. The motion speaks to staff reviewing it as part of the TMP update, and it's a complete review of the TMP, all the entire network, all the roads, planning, those that are still to be built, everything will be reviewed from the new lens of a new planning horizon of 2046, as well as all the new policies that are coming out of the OP and the work that we're doing with our TMP policies as well. So procedurally, there's no need for me to advance a similar motion for Robert Grant Avenue, Carp Road, Fernbrook Road, Maple Grove Road, and then many other projects in my ward that need urbanization or No, Councillor. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Councillor Fleury, then Councillor Hubley.
Yeah, that's a similar question of mine. I want to congratulate Councillor Dudas for bringing such motions. It's important to do so, but I want to understand more fully the context. We're delayed on the TMP. What are the impacts? Does this jump a queue? Is there other considerations that committee or council should have? I just want to gain that context fully.
Again, that's about the TMP. So until council approves the new TMP, the current one is still very valid. It has, a costing lens applied to it, an affordability lens. So we will continue to implement projects according to that plan, as well as the cycling and pedestrian plans.
So the motion today does what, if passed, what does it do in that context?
It's rolled into the TMP update. So the conclusions of the update, and that will come to committee when the update is finished, is completed for consideration for approval at that time.
So in short, does it bump anything up or down? Like what's?
No, it's directing staff to pay attention to this road, and we would with all the other roads in the network so far, future planned and perhaps even new ones. So it does not bump anything that's currently in the TMP that we have right now, which is the 2013 TMP that we're following. We're doing two steps, and one is looking forward and one is continuing on to implement until such time as you have the new update to consider and to approve.
Okay. Does the motion today give any further direction for the review for the new TMP?
New direction, would be something that we would roll into our work anyway. This is just highlighting the Navin Road between Brian Coburn and Mare Bleu, and the councillors' desire to urbanize it and make sure that we're paying attention to this road for the urbanization aspect of this project when we look at its priorities and how it links into the network and affordability and everything else. So the same lens will be applied across the board.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Great, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on Councillor Fleury's point for Ms. Chi, if you're already doing this, why do we need this first bullet? Because I'm of the same mind. This reads like we're asking you to review the priority that this road currently has, and if possible, move it up. So, as Councillor Gower said, if you're only going to look at the roads that you have a motion for, then we have to get writing an awful lot of motions. Otherwise, I think that part one should be coming out of this motion if you're already doing it. What's the point in moving the motion? Could you explain to me, Vivi, why you need this item number one in this motion if you're already doing it?
I think, Councillor, it may be just to give it a little bit more profile, but I think everything will be taken into context because we don't look at a network with just one link on its own. We have to look at the entire network and how they interact with each other. We look at where development is taking place, and that's so it doesn't harm. It's not harmful to have the first point in. I don't think it would change anything that we would do, that we would be treating everything fairly across the board when we're doing our analysis. I think this just would communicate out that the councillor feels that this is an important corridor and that it should be urbanized, and make sure that staff are aware of it, just as we would be for anything else across the network.
So then if it does help raise the profile, then as Councillor Gower suggested for Robert Grant, that's something that I've been working closely with them, trying to get the profile raised on that and getting it advanced in the TMP discussions when they get started. So why wouldn't Councillor Gower want to do a motion on Robert Grant following what you just said about the profile?
I think the profile would be for giving it a higher profile for residents to be aware that staff are aware of this. That's all.
Okay, it makes a good rationale then for a motion. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to Councillor Gower offline and see if I can support him with something. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. On to, for wrap up, Councillor Duda.
Thank you, Chair. And you know what, these are incredibly good points. I can maybe provide some clarity as well in that Navan Road, the vast majority of that stretch is going to be undergoing significant development. And the portions that are adjacent to those developments are going to see upgrades. Not the kind of upgrades we want. We want sidewalks, but they're going to see widened shoulders. There's going to be some improvements. The only problem is that this particular section between Renault and Brian Coburn, which is not a long stretch, it's incredibly short, has houses fronting onto it, has ditches, it has people trying to dodge traffic while trying to get their mail, and it has bus stops that are literally hanging off into a marshy land. And what happens is that we cannot collect DCs for that because none of the developments are right up against that road. So what will happen, what I'm trying to do with this is to let our residents know that when the TMP is being reviewed, when the rest of Navan Road as part of that holistic approach is being reviewed, that we're not forgetting this section. And that it's not just about widening. And I said that at the beginning, it's not about adding more cars. It has nothing to do with that. The fact is that we're looking at making sure that people can get to and from the park and ride, the $8.5 million park and ride that the past council approved at Chapel Hill South safely without having to dodge traffic or fall into a ditch, that they're not standing there waiting for their bus at the side of a mud pit, you know, with concrete barricades as the only thing behind them in the hole in the ground. It's really making sure that it's part of the review, but that it's not just about the focus about cars, but it's also the focus about how do we incorporate the pedestrian and the cycling infrastructure. So in no way does this jump the queue, so to speak, and I completely understand that and empathize with that. You know, we all have roads within our areas that need to be prioritized, and we feel that. But this community has felt for a very long time that it has not had the infrastructure to accommodate the growth. We cannot see it budge in terms of the NCC and option 7. So this is a small, it's not small, but it is a move to make sure that this is part of the review, that city staff are looking at it as a holistic approach when they're looking at the rest of the urbanization that's happening along Renault and Navan. So, you know, I would ask for your support on this. I'd be happy to talk to any of my council colleagues on their own sections of roads that we could look at. And I think that it's part of a greater discussion on how we prioritize these pieces and make sure that they're included in the upcoming review of the TMP.
Great, thank you very much for that. So on this item, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Great, thank you. Looking at the agenda, Kelly, tell me if I'm missing anything. I see no notices of motion, no inquiries, no further business, and the next meeting would take place May 5th, 2021. Have I missed anything, Kelly? Are we good to go?
Nope, you're good.
Great, thank you very much, committee members and councillors.
Excellent meeting, Mr. Chair.